What if everything you believed about leadership within Ferrari has just changed without anyone saying it openly? Because while everyone looked at Charles Leclerc as the team's natural reference in silence under the artificial reign of Fiorano, Lewis Hamilton did something that no one expected: to be clearly faster on the most complicated terrain, at the most controlled moment, and with no room for excuses. And here comes the key question that is going to change everything. If Hamilton is already outperforming Leclerc even in conditions where Ferrari can't hide anything, what is going to happen when this transfers to a real Grand Prix? The starting point of this whole story is much more important than it seems, because Ferrari did not arrive at Fiorano simply to ride. It arrived with an urgent need to understand its own present. After a beginning of the stage where Lewis Hamilton was still in the process of adaptation, and where Charles Leclerc continued to be, at least in theory, the team's natural reference, this wet test represented something deeper. A silent, internal evaluation without media pressure, where the car and the driver speak for themselves. Because you have to understand one key thing: these Pirelli tests are not normal training sessions. They are not sessions where the driver seeks to be faster than his teammate. Everything is limited, controlled, even hidden from the teams themselves. They don't know the compounds, they can't adjust the car freely, they can't pursue pure performance. And yet, when a driver stands out in this context, it is precisely when what he is showing has the most value. There are no excuses here, there is no external narrative, there are only real sensations and pure adaptability. And in that scenario, Hamilton found something that Ferrari had been waiting for a long time, but perhaps not from him so soon. From the first runs, the Briton began to show a connection with the SF26 that had not been seen so clearly until now, especially in low-grip conditions. As the car moved, while the wet track demanded absolute precision, Hamilton not only controlled the situation, but began to build increasingly solid, more consistent, cleaner laps. And that, in the wet, changes everything. The most interesting thing is that this does not happen in a vacuum. It is preceded by signs that many overlooked. Already in previous tests, Hamilton had shown flashes of being at the level or even slightly above Leclerc at certain moments, but always with the context of adaptation, of process, of room for improvement. Fiorano completely breaks that narrative, because here we are no longer talking about adaptation, we are talking about execution. And when a driver like Hamilton starts to execute, the scenario changes completely. Ferrari meanwhile watched, because although publicly this is a tire test, internally every lap counts, every feeling matters, every difference is analyzed. And what began to build on that first day was uncomfortable. Hamilton was not only complying, he was marking territory. In an environment designed to eliminate external advantages, he was finding performance where he should not stand out as much. This is the true beginning of the conflict that could define the season. Not because there is a direct battle yet, not because Leclerc is constantly being outpaced in the race, but because for the first time there is clear evidence that Hamilton is starting to understand Ferrari ahead of schedule. And when that happens, when a driver of his caliber feels comfortable, the next step is no longer to adapt, it is to dominate. When Leclerc took the car on the second day, Ferrari expected a natural, almost automatic reaction, because if there is one area where the Monegasque has proven to be strong, it is in complicated conditions, where control of the front axle and confidence at the limit make the difference. But what began to leak broke that logic. Hamilton had not only been fast, he had clearly been more effective. And this completely changes the internal reading, because it is no longer a specific return or an isolated moment, but rather a reference that could not be matched. This is where the most dangerous factor of all comes in: consistency. Because in Formula One, especially in rainy conditions, it is not the one who makes the most spectacular lap who wins, but rather the one who repeats a high performance over and over again without making mistakes. And that was precisely what Hamilton managed to build during his journey, a solid foundation of performance that did not depend on a perfect attempt, but on a deep understanding of the car and the behavior of the tire in extreme conditions. Meanwhile, Leclerc was in an uncomfortable situation, not because his performance was bad, but because it was no longer enough to stand out. And this nuance is key, because Ferrari does not need one of its drivers to be good, it needs to know who can lead the project when the decisive moments arrive. And what Hamilton showed at Fiorano begins to send a very clear message within the team. He is not here to adapt slowly, he is ready to compete now. Furthermore, there is a context that makes this even more relevant, and that is that it is not the first time that Hamilton surpasses Leclerc in recent tests. There were already precedents where the Briton had been slightly ahead, but always with minimal differences, within the logical margin of a pilot in the process of adaptation. Fiorano is different, because it happens in an extremely controlled environment and under conditions where the pure skill of the driver is exposed much more than in the dry. And when that kind of advantage shows up there, it's much harder to ignore. Ferrari, in silence, begins to face a question that it did not expect to have to answer so soon. What if Hamilton becomes the reference sooner than expected? Because this not only affects performance on the track, it affects the direction of development, the team's confidence, the strategic decisions that will be made during the season. When a driver begins to stand out in this way, the entire team begins to turn slightly towards him, even without realizing it. And this is where the story becomes really interesting, because Leclerc has not lost his level, he has not made serious mistakes, he has not been surpassed in a direct battle. But still, for the first time, he begins to see himself in a position where he no longer completely controls the narrative within Ferrari. And in Formula 1, losing control of the internal narrative can be as dangerous as losing time on the track. This second act leaves us with a growing tension, a clear feeling that something is changing within the team, although it has not yet manifested itself publicly. Because when the data contradicts expectations, when the driver who should be learning begins to lead, what comes next no longer depends only on the car, it depends on how Ferrari manages this new balance. Ferrari now finds itself in a delicate position, because these types of differences, although they are not official or decisive in terms of results, do directly influence the internal perception of the team. Engineers, strategists, and technical managers are beginning to see patterns. They are beginning to notice who transmits more confidence, who adapts better, who offers more stability in critical conditions. And in that context, Hamilton has just delivered a silent but extremely powerful blow. Because there is something that defines great champions, and it's not just speed, it's the ability to appear just when the conditions are most difficult. And that was exactly what happened at Fiorano. While everything was designed to be a neutral test, without hierarchies, without narrative, Hamilton created one. And when a driver achieves that without directly competing, it means the impact is even greater. From here on, everything changes. We are no longer talking about an adaptation process, nor about a driver who needs time to understand his new team. We are talking about someone who has already found a solid foundation from which they can begin to build mastery. And that, within Ferrari, completely alters the planned times. Because the plan was not this, the plan was a progressive transition. But reality is starting to go much faster. For Leclerc, this represents the first big turning point of the season, although it is not yet reflected in the results. Because for the first time, it is not about defending oneself on the track, it is about responding to a threat that is growing from within. And that type of pressure is different, quieter, more constant, more difficult to manage. It is not an external rival, it is your own partner starting to gain ground in all key aspects. And this is where Ferrari will have to make decisions, not necessarily explicit, but strategic. Because when two drivers at this level start to diverge in performance under critical conditions, the team inevitably leans towards one of them, whether in development, confidence, or execution. And if Hamilton maintains this level, that inclination could come sooner than expected. What we saw in Fiorano was the beginning of something much bigger than a simple test. It was a sign, a warning. The first real indication that Hamilton has not arrived at Ferrari to close his career. He has arrived to redefine it. And now the question is no longer if he can surpass Leclerc. The real question is when will he start to do so visibly for everyone. The conclusion of all this is much deeper than it seems at first glance, because what happened at Fiorano was not simply a test where Lewis Hamilton was faster than Charles Leclerc. It was the first real moment where the established narrative within Ferrari was broken. 4 months, even since his arrival, the dominant idea was clear. Hamilton would need time, adaptation, understanding of the car, while Leclerc would continue to be the pillar of the team. But within a few runs in extreme conditions, that logic began to break down. Because when you eliminate variables, when the environment is completely controlled, when there are no strategic excuses or configuration differences, the only thing left is the pilot. And there Hamilton made the difference. This does not mean that Ferrari already has a new defined leader, nor that Leclerc has lost his place within the team, but it does change something fundamental: perception. And in Formula 1, internal perception is everything. It is what defines where the car develops, in whom trust is placed at critical moments, who receives that little extra margin when everything is at stake. The most dangerous thing for Ferrari is not that Hamilton was faster in the wet. It's that he did it so soon. Because this accelerates all processes, breaks the planned times, and forces the team to rethink decisions sooner than expected. And when a team enters that scenario, where two drivers can fight for internal control, management becomes as important as on-track performance. So Fiorano makes something very clear. This is not a transition, it is the beginning of a battle. A silent, internal battle that has not yet exploded in front of the public, but that is already setting the course of the team. And if this level of Hamilton is transferred to the real track, then we will no longer be talking about a surprise, we will be talking about a change of era within Ferrari. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.